My 7-year-old dad's nursing home tried to scam me out of $4,000 a month. Mrs. Bennett, we need to discuss your father's behavior. He was aggressive towards one of our aides this morning. I stood in the cereal aisle with a box of oatmeal in my hand. What? He struck Carla when she tried to help him dress. She has bruises on her arm. This is the third incident this week. My father could barely lift a spoon. He'd been in Meadowbrook Care Center for 6 days. Advanced dementia, limited mobility, confusion that made him think I was his sister half the time. The neurologist said he had maybe a year left, and I couldn't keep him safe at home anymore. It had taken me 3 months to find a place with an open bed. There must be some mistake, I said. My father doesn't. We documented everything. He's becoming combative, and we're not equipped to handle violent residents. I need you to come in today so we can discuss next steps. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I left the cart in the aisle and drove straight over. My father was sitting in his recliner by the window when I walked into his room. He looked small in the afternoon light, his hands folded in his lap. He wore the blue cardigan I'd brought from home. His eyes were distant but calm. Hi, Dad. He blinked at me. Helen? It's Rachel, Dad, your daughter. Oh, he smiled, vague and sweet. That's nice. I pulled a chair close and took his hand. His grip was weak, fingers cold. I watched him for any sign of agitation, any hint of the violence the administrator had described. He stared out the window at the parking lot. How are you feeling today? Tired, he said. I think I slept too long. A nursing aide passed the doorway, glanced in, and kept walking. I stood and followed her into the hall. Excuse me, I'm Rachel Bennett. My father's in 214. She stopped, turned. Young, maybe 25, with dark circles under her eyes. Yes? I got a call about an incident this morning. They said he hit someone. Her face went blank. I don't know anything about that. You don't know if a resident attacked a staff member? I wasn't on shift this morning. She looked past me down the hall. You should talk to the administrator. Can you tell me who was on shift? I'd like to speak with them. I really can't. She saw someone behind me and her expression shifted. Ms. Pritchard can help you. I turned. The administrator stood at the nurse's station watching us. Patricia Pritchard, mid-50s, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, navy blazer over a white blouse. She'd given me the tour when I'd first visited, all warm smiles and reassurances about personalized care. Mrs. Bennett, let's talk in my office. I followed her down the hall. The office was small, neat, with framed certificates on the wall and a desk covered in file folders. She closed the door and gestured to a chair. I know this is difficult, she said, settling behind the desk. Dementia can cause sudden behavioral changes. My father has never been violent. Many families say that. She opened a folder and turned it toward me. These are the incident reports from the past week. I stared at the pages. 7 reports, each describing aggressive behavior, refusal of care, verbal threats, dates, times, staff signatures. The first one was dated 2 days after I'd admitted him. I visit every day, I said. I've never seen him act like this. Dementia patients often mask their symptoms around family. It's called showtime behavior. But our staff sees what happens when you're not here. She leaned forward. Your father needs a higher level of care than we can provide. I've found a memory care facility that specializes in aggressive dementia patients. Green Hill Manor. They have an opening next week. I'm not moving him. Her expression hardened. Mrs. Bennett, if your father continues to pose a danger to our staff, we will have no choice but to discharge him. And if you refuse to provide appropriate care, we may need to involve adult protective services. I stood up, the folder still open on her desk. I want to speak with the aide he supposedly hit. She's not on shift today. Then I'll come back tomorrow. That's your right. Pritchard's smile was thin, cold. But these incidents are escalating. The longer you wait, the more you put your father and our staff at risk. I walked out without answering and went back to my father's room. He was asleep in the recliner, head tilted to one side, mouth slightly open. I sat with him until visiting hours ended, watching him breathe. He never moved. The next morning, I called Meadowbrook before I left for work. A different voice answered, bored and nasal. This is Rachel Bennett. My father is in room 214. I'd like to speak with Carla, the aide who was working with him yesterday. Hold on. Silence. Then music, some soft jazz loop. I waited 3 minutes before the line clicked. Mrs. Bennett? Pritchard's voice. Carla isn't available right now. When will she be available? She's taking a few days off. The incident with your father was quite traumatic for her. I need to speak with someone who was in the room when it happened. I've already provided you with the incident reports. Is there something else I can help you with? Yes, I want to see the security footage. A pause. We don't have cameras in resident rooms, privacy regulations, hallway cameras then, common areas. Our system has been experiencing technical issues this week. I'm afraid the footage isn't available. I hung up and drove to work. My phone rang twice during the morning, both times from Meadowbrook's main line. I let them go to voicemail. The first message was from a nurse named Denise. Mrs. Bennett, your father refused his medication this morning and threw his breakfast tray. We need you to call us back to discuss his care plan. The second message was Pritchard again. Mrs. Bennett, we've had another incident. Your father became verbally aggressive during his bath and had to be restrained for his own safety. Please call me as soon as possible. I left work at lunch and drove to Meadowbrook. My father was sitting in the dining room with 5 other residents, a tray of untouched food in front of him. Mashed potatoes, green beans, some kind of meat and gravy. He stared at it like he'd forgotten what it was for. Hi, Dad. He looked up, his face brightening. Rachel, you came. I come every day. I sat down across from him. Are you hungry? I don't know. He poked at the potatoes with his fork. What is this? Lunch? Do you want me to help you? No, I can do it. He took a small bite, chewed slowly, swallowed. It's cold. A nursing aide walked past, the same young woman from yesterday. I stood and caught her arm. Excuse me, can you tell me what happened this morning during my father's bath? She pulled her arm back. I wasn't there. Who was there? I don't know. I work the day shift. Baths are usually morning. So you don't know anything about him being restrained? Her eyes flicked toward the hallway. You need to talk to the charge nurse. She walked away before I could ask anything else. I sat back down. My father had given up on the food and was staring out the window again. I watched him for 20 minutes. He didn't move except to blink. No agitation, no anger, no sign of the violent behavior described described in the reports. That evening, I called the state ombudsman's office. A woman named Karen took my information and said she'd look into it. Can you request copies of the incident reports? I asked. You have the right to see your father's records. You should submit a written request directly to the facility. They've already shown me some reports, but I want to make sure I'm seeing everything. Submit the request in writing. They have 5 business days to respond. I drafted the letter that night and dropped it off at Meadowbrook the next morning. Pritchard wasn't in her office. The receptionist took the envelope and said she'd make sure it was delivered. 2 days later, a thick packet arrived in the mail. 12 incident reports spanning the 9 days my father had been at Meadowbrook. I spread them out on my kitchen table and read through each one. According to the reports, my father had punched an aide, kicked a nurse, thrown a water pitcher at a staff member, screamed obscenities during medication rounds, and attempted to bite someone during a diaper change. The descriptions were detailed, clinical. Each one was signed by a different staff member. I stared at the report dated 3 days ago. It claimed my father had stood up from his wheelchair, shoved a nurse against the wall, and tried to strangle her before 2 aides pulled him off. My father couldn't stand without assistance. The neurologist's notes from his last evaluation were clear. Severe muscle weakness, limited range of motion, requires full support for transfers. He couldn't lift his arms above his shoulders. I called the neurologist's office and requested a copy of the evaluation. Then I called Karen at the ombudsman's office. I've reviewed the incident reports, I said. They describe behavior that's physically impossible for my father. Can you document that? His doctor documented it. I'm getting the records. Good. Keep copies of everything. I'll schedule a visit to the facility next week. The next morning, a letter arrived from Adult Protective Services. Someone had filed a report alleging I was neglecting my father by refusing to authorize appropriate medical care. The letter said an investigator would be contacting me within 10 business days to schedule an interview. I read it twice, standing in my driveway. The language was formal, bureaucratic. It said the allegations included failure to provide necessary medical treatment and refusal to cooperate with care providers. I called Meadowbrook. Pritchard answered on the second ring. Did you file a report with APS? Mrs. Bennett, I'm required by law to report suspected neglect. Your father needs memory care and you're refusing to authorize the transfer. That puts him at risk. He's not at risk. You're lying about his behavior. I understand you're upset, but these accusations are serious. If you continue to interfere with your father's care, I'll have no choice but to pursue emergency guardianship through the courts. The line went dead. I sat in my car with the letter in my hand and tried to think. They were building a case. Every refusal, every question, every visit was being documented as evidence that I was the problem. I found an elder care attorney through a referral hotline. Her name was Diane Russo, and her office was in a strip mall 20 minutes from my house. She listened while I explained everything, her pen moving across a legal pad in short, efficient strokes. Do you have copies of the incident reports? I slid the folder across her desk. She read through them, her expression unchanging. These descriptions don't match your father's physical capabilities. His neurologist says he can't stand unassisted. One of these reports claims he strangled a nurse. She made a note. I'll need the medical records. Everything from the past year. I already requested them. Good. Document every visit you make to the facility. Write down what you observe, who you speak to, what condition your father is in. Take photos if you can do it discreetly. She closed the folder and looked at me. My advice is to move him out of there as soon as possible. They said they'd discharge him if I don't cooperate. They can't discharge without proper notice. 30 days minimum, and they have to help you find another placement. But if they're fabricating reports, they might try to force your hand. She leaned back in her chair. Start calling other facilities today. Get him on waiting lists. The moment a bed opens up, we move him. I spent the afternoon calling nursing homes. 6 of them had no openings. 3 said they'd put my father on a list. 1 asked why he was leaving Meadowbrook. We're looking for a better fit, I said. Does he have behavioral issues? No, because we can't accept residents with a history of aggression. I hung up and called the next number. That evening, I drove to Meadowbrook with a notebook and my phone. My father was in his room, sitting in the recliner. His shirt was buttoned wrong, and one of his slippers was missing. He smiled when he saw me. There you are. Hi, Dad. I knelt beside the chair and fixed his buttons. How are you feeling? Tired. I think they forgot about me today. What do you mean? Nobody came. I waited, but nobody came. I looked at the dry erase board on the wall. It was supposed to list his care schedule. Someone had written, bath 8 a.m., meds, 9 a.m., lunch, 12 p.m. in blue marker, but the spaces for check marks were blank. Did you eat lunch? He frowned. I don't remember. The meal tray on his bedside table was empty except for a juice box and a sealed pack of crackers. I opened the crackers and handed them to him. Here, eat these. He took them but didn't open the package. I opened it for him and he ate 1 cracker, slowly, like he had to remember how to chew. I wrote in the notebook, 6:15 p.m., meal tray untouched except juice. Shirt buttoned incorrectly. Father says no one came today. The next morning, Pritchard called while I was getting ready for work. Mrs. Bennett, I understand you've been contacting other facilities. I'm exploring options. I need to inform you that your father is not medically stable enough to be transferred. Any move at this stage would be dangerous. His doctor hasn't said that. Our medical director disagrees. Your father is a fall risk and a danger to himself and others. No reputable facility will accept him in this condition. Then I'll take him home. If you remove him against medical advice, I'll have to report that to APS as well. You're not equipped to care for him safely. Her voice was calm, measured. Mrs. Bennett, I'm trying to help you. Greenhill Manor has a bed available. They're equipped to handle his needs. If you authorize the transfer, we can have him moved by the end of the week. I'm not authorizing anything. Then I have no choice but to initiate discharge proceedings. If you don't find appropriate placement within 30 days, your father will be released to the street. I hung up and called Diane Russo. She told me to document the threat and keep looking for another facility. 3 days later, a woman named Sandra Kim came to my apartment. She was the APS caseworker assigned to investigate the neglect report. She wore a gray pantsuit and carried a leather portfolio. I've already visited Meadowbrook and interviewed the staff, she said, sitting on my couch. I'd like to hear your side. I gave her copies of everything. The incident reports, the neurologist's evaluation, my notes from each visit. She looked through the pages. The staff at Meadowbrook presented a consistent account of your father's behavior. They believe he needs memory care and that you're refusing to accept accept his condition. They're lying. Why would they lie? I don't know yet. She closed the portfolio. Mrs. Bennet, I understand this is difficult. Dementia changes people. It's possible your father is behaving differently when you're not there. He can't physically do the things they're describing. The administrator showed me videos of him walking unassisted. I stared at her. What? Short clips from the hallway cameras. Your father standing up from his wheelchair walking to the nurse's station. She said he's capable of more than you realize. I want to see those videos. They're part of the facility's records. You'd need to request them directly. She stood and handed me a business card. I'm going to keep the case open for now. If your father is discharged and you don't have appropriate placement, we may need to pursue emergency guardianship. I'd like to avoid that. She left. I sat on the couch with her card in my hand and tried to breathe. That afternoon, I went to Meadowbrook unannounced. It was 2:30 between lunch and dinner. My father was in his room lying on the bed. His pants were soaked and the smell hit me as soon as I walked in. Dad. He turned his head. His face was red, his eyes wet. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay. I found the call button and pressed it. No one came. I pressed it again and walked into the hallway. A nursing aide I'd never seen before was leaning against the wall, scrolling on her phone. My father needs to be changed. She looked up. I'm on break. He's been lying in urine. I don't know how long. I'll let someone know. Can you help him now? I'm on break, she said again and walked away. I went back to the room and found a stack of adult briefs in the closet. I cleaned my father up as best I could and got him into fresh clothes. He cried the whole time, apologizing over and over. It's okay, Dad. It's not your fault. I wrote in the notebook, 2:35 p.m. Father in soiled clothing, call button not answered, aide refused to help. I took a photo of the wet bedding. When I left the building, 2 other families were standing in the lobby talking to Pritchard. I heard my name as I passed. Some people just can't accept the truth, Pritchard was saying. Her father needs specialized care, but she insists on keeping him here where he's suffering. It's heartbreaking to watch. One of the other family members, a woman about my age, glanced at me with something like pity. I kept walking. That night, I got an email from Green Hill Manor. They'd heard I was looking for memory care placement for my father and wanted to schedule a tour. The email included a brochure with photos of private rooms, garden courtyards, and smiling staff members. The cost was $4,000 a month more than Meadowbrook. At the bottom of the email was a note. Referral from Patricia Pritchard, Meadowbrook Care Center. I deleted it and opened my notebook. 12 pages of observations, none of it enough to prove anything. I called a lawyer who specialized in elder law and privacy regulations. His name was Greg Wolf, and he answered on the second ring. If I put a camera in my father's nursing home room, is that legal? Depends on the state. Where are you? I told him. You're allowed to install monitoring equipment in your father's room as long as you post visible notice that recording is taking place. The facility can't stop you. It's his room, and he has a right to safety. Even if the facility says it violates their policy doesn't override state law. Post the notice, document that you posted it, and keep the footage secure. I ordered a small camera online with overnight shipping. It arrived the next afternoon. A black cube smaller than a deck of cards with a magnetic base. I charged it, downloaded the app, and drove to Meadowbrook. My father was asleep in his recliner when I walked in. I closed the door and mounted the camera on top of his closet, angled toward the bed and the recliner. Then I printed a notice on bright yellow paper and taped it to the wall beside the door. This room is monitored by video recording for safety purposes. I tested the app. The image was clear, the audio sharp. I could see my father's face, the bed, the doorway, and most of the room. I sat with him until dinner. He woke up confused, asking where his mother was. I held his hand and told him she was resting. He nodded and closed his eyes again. When I left, I made sure the notice was visible from the hallway. The first night of footage showed nothing unusual. A nursing aide came in at 9, helped my father into bed, and left. He slept through the night. The second night, no one came after 8. My father woke up around 11 and called out. No one answered. He tried to get out of bed, couldn't manage it, and lay back down. At midnight, he called out again. His voice was thin, frightened. He called for me for his mother. For someone named Eddie I didn't recognize. No one came until 6 the next morning. I watched the footage 3 times. My father had been alone, awake, calling for help for 7 hours. I saved the file and kept watching. The third day, a nursing aide came in at 10 in the morning and found my father still in bed, his sheets soaked. She wrinkled her nose, looked at the doorway, and left without touching him. She came back 20 minutes later with gloves and a single towel, changed him roughly while he cried, and left the soiled bedding in a pile on the floor. At 2 in the afternoon, another aide brought a lunch tray, set it on the table across the room, and left. My father was still in bed. He couldn't reach the food. The tray sat there untouched until someone took it away at 4. That evening, I watched the aide from the morning shift type something into a tablet while standing in the hallway outside my father's room. I couldn't see the screen, but she was in frame for 40 seconds, her face lit by the glow. Then she walked away. I checked the incident reports the next day. The report from that shift said my father had refused lunch, thrown his medication cup at the wall, and attempted to bite the aide during a diaper change. None of it had happened. I called Diane Russo and sent her the footage. She called me back within an hour. This is neglect. Document everything. Keep recording. What do I do with it? We'll need it for the state, but don't share it yet. Keep gathering evidence. The footage from the next week showed the same pattern. My father was left alone for hours, sometimes through entire shifts. When staff did come in, they were rushed, rough, impatient. One aide yanked his arm hard enough to make him yelp. Another spoke to him like he was a dog. A third ignored him completely when he asked for water, walking out while he was mid-sentence. Every shift ended with someone typing on a tablet in the hallway. Every day, new incident reports appeared in his file. On the 8th day of recording, Pritchard walked into my father's room while I was sitting with him. She looked at the camera, then at the notice on the wall. What is that? A camera. You can't have that in here. State law says I can. My father has a right to safety monitoring. Her jaw tightened. It violates our policy. Patients have a right to privacy. He's my father, and this is his room. The notice is posted. If your staff doesn't want to be recorded, they can provide care the way they're supposed to. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. Remove it or I'll have security take it down. Touch it and I'll file a police report for theft. She stared at me for a long moment, her face flushed. Then she turned and walked out. I got a certified letter 2 days later. It said the camera violated facility policy, created a hostile work environment, and had to be removed within 24 hours, or my father would be discharged for cause. I forwarded it to Diane Russo. She sent a response on her firm's letterhead within 2 hours, citing the state statute and informing Meadowbrook that any retaliation or discharge discharge related to the lawful monitoring device would result in legal action. The camera stayed. I kept watching the footage. By the end of the second week, I had 40 hours of recordings showing neglect, rough handling, and falsified reports. I also had something else. The same 3 staff members appeared in almost every incident, 2 aides and a nurse. They worked the morning and evening shifts, and they were the ones who spent the least time in my father's room. They were also the ones I saw typing on tablets in the hallway after every shift. I started writing down names from their ID badges. On a Wednesday afternoon, I was sitting in the Meadowbrook lobby reviewing footage on my phone when another family walked in. A man about my age and an older woman, maybe his mother. They were arguing in low voices with Pritchard near the front desk. "He's not aggressive," the man was saying. "You're making this up." "Mr. Torres, I understand this is hard to hear, but your grandfather needs more intensive care than we can provide. Green Hill Manor has an excellent program for patients like him. He doesn't need a memory care facility. He's confused sometimes, but he's not violent." The incident reports say otherwise. The man's voice rose. "I've never seen him act that way, not once." Pritchard's expression was smooth, practiced. Dementia patients often mask their symptoms around family. It's very common. I stood and walked over. "Excuse me?" They turned. Pritchard's face went cold when she saw me. "Is your grandfather in room 309? I asked the man. He blinked. "Yes, why?" "Because I think the same thing is happening to him that's happening to my father." Pritchard stepped between us. "Mrs. Bennett, this is a private conversation. My father is in 214, I said, ignoring her. "They've been filing false incident reports and threatening to discharge him unless I move him to an expensive memory care facility. I have it on video." The man stared at me. "Video? I put a camera in his room. It's legal. You should do the same." Pritchard's voice sharpened. "Mrs. Bennett, you need to leave." "Are they pushing you toward Green Hill Manor?" I asked. The man nodded slowly. "They've mentioned it 3 times. "Don't go, it's a scam." Pritchard stepped closer, her face tight with anger. "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling security." The older woman, the man's mother, touched my arm. "Can we talk outside?" We walked out to the parking lot. The man's name was Victor Torres and the woman was his mother, Linda. His grandfather had been at Meadowbrook for 2 weeks. "They said he punched a nurse," Victor said. "But he has arthritis in both hands. He can barely make a fist." "Same thing with my father," I said. "They're documenting behavior that's physically impossible and using it to justify moving patients to a more expensive facility." Linda pulled out her phone. "We got a letter from APS last week. They said we were neglecting him by leaving him here." I got the same letter. Victor looked back at the building. "Why would they do this?" "I don't know yet, but I have 2 weeks of footage showing how they're doing it." I gave him my number. "Install a camera, post the notice, record everything, then call me." They left and I sat in my car watching the entrance. 20 minutes later, another family came out. An older couple walking slowly toward the parking lot. The woman was crying. I got out and approached them. "Excuse me, is your family member a resident here?" The man turned. His face was tired, worn. "Our daughter, room 218. Are they trying to move her to another facility?" His wife's expression cracked. "They said she's too difficult, that we're refusing to accept she needs help. Has anyone mentioned Green Hill Manor?" They both nodded. I gave them my number too. Victor called me 2 days later. His voice was tight, controlled. I put the camera up. "You were right. What did you see?" "They left him in bed all morning. Didn't bring food, didn't check on him. Then the aide came in, typed something on her tablet in the hallway, and left. The incident report says he threw his breakfast tray and tried to kick her. Same pattern as my father. I want to meet. Can you come to my house tonight?" He lived in a townhouse 20 minutes away. Linda answered the door and led me to the kitchen table where Victor had his laptop open. He played the footage without saying anything. His grandfather lying in bed, alone, for 3 hours. An aide walking in, glancing at him, walking out. The tablet in the hallway, the typed report. "I called the other family you talked to," Victor said. "The couple with the daughter in 218. They installed a camera too. Same thing." Linda pulled out a folder. "We also got this yesterday. It was a discharge notice. 30 days to find new placement." The letter cited continued behavioral issues and stated that Meadowbrook could no longer safely care for his grandfather. "They're kicking him out," she said. "They sent me the same letter last week," I said. Victor closed the laptop. "There are 5 other families dealing with this. I talked to them in the lobby. All dementia patients. All getting pushed toward Green Hill Manor. How did you find them?" I started asking around. Most people think their family member really is the problem, but a few were suspicious. One woman said her husband was supposedly combative, but she visits twice a day and he's completely docile. I pulled out my phone and opened the email from Green Hill Manor. "Look at this." Victor read it. "Referral from Patricia Pritchard. I looked up the ownership records yesterday. Green Hill Manor is owned by someone named Jennifer Pritchard." Linda leaned forward. "Her daughter?" "I don't know yet, but it's the same last name." Victor searched on his phone, his fingers moving fast across the screen. "Jennifer Pritchard, licensed administrator, owns Green Hill Manor. Also owns 2 other memory care facilities in the state." He scrolled. "And here, Patricia Pritchard listed as her mother on a business filing from 4 years ago." We stared at the screen. "They're moving patients from the cheaper facility to the expensive one," I said, "fabricating behavior problems to justify the transfer." Linda's voice was quiet. "How many people have they done this to?" "I don't know, but we need to find out." I called Diane Russo from Victor's kitchen. She answered on the first ring and I explained everything while she took notes. "I need copies of all the footage, the incident reports, and the discharge notices," she said. "I'll file a complaint with the state health department tomorrow. This is fraud and it's elder abuse." "What happens after you file?" "The state opens an investigation. They'll send inspectors to review records, interview staff, and examine the care practices. If they find what I think they're going to find, this facility gets shut down." "How long does that take?" "Weeks, maybe months. But I can also request an emergency investigation based on immediate safety concerns. That moves faster." I gave her Victor's contact information and we agreed to meet at her office the next morning. That night, I went through every frame of footage I'd recorded. 48 hours of video showing my father alone, neglected, ignored. I watched the aides walk past his room without stopping. I watched him call for help and get no answer. I watched someone yank his arm hard enough to leave a red mark. I saved every file and labeled them by date and time. At Diane's office the next day, she had us sign affidavits detailing everything we'd witnessed and recorded. She compiled the footage, the incident reports, the discharge letters, and the ownership records into a single packet. "I'm filing this with the state health department and the Medicaid fraud division," she said. "I'm also sending copies to the elder abuse prosecutor. This is organized fraud." "What do we do in the meantime?" Victor asked. "Keep recording. Don't remove the cameras. Don't stop visiting. Document everything." She looked at me. "And be prepared for for retaliation. Once they realize what's happening, they're going to push back. The state investigator showed up at Meadowbrook 3 days later. Her name was Claire Mendoza, and she arrived without warning at 10 in the morning. I only knew because Victor called me from the lobby. There's a woman here from the state health department. She's in Pritchard's office. I drove over and found Victor and Linda sitting in the waiting area. We watched through the glass as Mendoza and Pritchard talked. Pritchard's face was red, her gestures sharp. Mendoza came out an hour later carrying 2 file boxes. She saw us and stopped. Are you the families who filed the complaint? We stood. Yes. I need to interview each of you separately. Can you stay? We waited while she set up in an empty conference room. She interviewed me first, recording everything on a small digital recorder. Walk me through what you observed. I went through it step by step. The false reports, the neglect, the pressure to transfer my father, the APS complaint, the discharge threat. I showed her the footage on my phone. She watched in silence. When it ended, she made a note on her pad. How many other families are experiencing this? At least 6 that we know of. All dementia patients? Yes. She interviewed Victor and Linda next, then the couple with the daughter in 218. By the time she finished, it was almost 4 in the afternoon. Pritchard tried to intercept her in the lobby. Ms. Mendoza, I'd like to clarify a few things about the complaints. I'll contact you when I have questions. Mendoza walked past her and out the door. I followed her to the parking lot. What happens now? She stopped at her car and looked back at the building. I'm reviewing their care logs, staffing records, and financial disclosures. I've already found discrepancies. What kind of discrepancies? Incident reports filed during times when no staff were assigned to those rooms. Patients documented as aggressive during shifts that were understaffed by half. Transfer recommendations to a facility owned by the administrator's daughter. She opened her car door. Keep your camera running. Don't let them intimidate you. This investigation is going to take a few weeks, but I've seen enough to refer this to the prosecutor's office. She drove away and I stood in the parking lot watching the building. The next morning I got a call from a lawyer representing Meadowbrook. He told me I was being sued for defamation, harassment, and violating the privacy of staff members. Your client is fabricating reports and neglecting patients, I said. Those are serious allegations with no basis in fact. Remove the defamatory statements you've made to other families or we'll pursue damages. I hung up and called Diane. She laughed when I told her. They're panicking. Don't respond. Let me handle it. That afternoon, Pritchard called a meeting in the common area. I heard about it from Linda, who was visiting her husband's grandfather. She told everyone that some families were spreading lies about the facility and trying to destroy their reputation, Linda said. She said we were the reason good staff were quitting and patients weren't getting proper care. Did she name us? Not directly, but everyone knew who she was talking about. 2 more families pulled me aside that week. Both had dementia patients. Both were being pushed toward Green Hill Manor. I gave them Diane's number and told them to install cameras. Victor found 3 more families dealing with the same pattern at a different nursing home across town. Same administrator, same pressure tactics, same transfer facility. Pritchard worked there 2 years ago, he said. She left right before the state investigated them for billing fraud. Nothing stuck, but the pattern was identical. We sent everything to Mendoza. A week later, she called me. I'm recommending criminal charges. The prosecutor's office is opening a case. Keep doing what you're doing. How long until something happens? I can't give you a timeline, but the evidence is strong. They've been running this scheme for years. I visited my father that evening. He was sitting in his recliner staring at the wall. I sat beside him and took his hand. Hi, Dad. He looked at me, his eyes focusing slowly. You're here. I'm always here. He squeezed my hand, his grip weak but steady. I know. The prosecutor's name was Daniel Reyes. He called me on a Thursday morning 2 weeks after Mendoza filed her report. I've reviewed the evidence. I'm opening a criminal investigation into Patricia Pritchard and Jennifer Pritchard for elder abuse, fraud, and financial exploitation. I need you to bring me everything you have. I met him at his office that afternoon with 3 banker's boxes full of printed footage stills, incident reports, financial records Victor had pulled from public filings, and affidavits from 8 families. Diane came with me. Reyes went through the boxes methodically, spreading documents across his conference table. He watched the footage on my laptop without speaking. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair. How many facilities has Patricia Pritchard worked at in the past 6 years? 3 that we know of, I said. Victor found the employment records. And Jennifer Pritchard owns the memory care facility where patients are transferred? She owns 3. Green Hill Manor, Riverside Memory Care, and Oakmont Gardens. All high-cost private pay. He made notes on a legal pad. I'm issuing subpoenas for all patient records, staffing logs, and financial documents from Meadowbrook and all 3 memory care facilities. I'm also requesting a full audit from the state Medicaid fraud division. He looked at me. This is going to take time. Months, possibly. Can you keep your father safe in the meantime? I'm moving him as soon as I find a bed. Do it fast. I called 6 facilities that afternoon. 1 had an opening in 2 weeks. I put down a deposit and started packing my father's things. Reyes moved faster than I expected. Within a week, state inspectors descended on Meadowbrook and seized records. They interviewed staff, reviewed care logs, and audited financial transactions going back 4 years. Pritchard tried to block them. Diane filed an emergency motion, and the inspectors walked back in with a court order. Victor called me 3 days into the audit. They found it. The pattern goes back 6 years across all 3 facilities Pritchard worked at. Same tactics, same transfer pipeline, same financial kickbacks. How many patients? They're still counting, at least 40. The state held a meeting for affected families in a community center conference room. 23 people showed up. Reyes and Mendoza stood at the front and walked us through what they'd found. Patricia Pritchard systematically understaffed care for dementia patients, documented the resulting distress as behavioral problems, and pressured families to transfer patients to facilities owned by her daughter, Reyes said. The transfers generated higher reimbursement rates and private pay fees that were split between the 2 women. We've identified 42 patients who were subjected to this scheme over 6 years. A woman in the back row stood up. My mother died at Green Hill Manor. They said she fell. Mendoza's face was grim. We're reviewing all patient deaths at the 3 memory care facilities. If you have concerns about your family members' care, please speak with us after this meeting. 6 families stayed behind. I heard one man say his father had died within 3 months of being transferred. Another woman said her mother developed bed sores that went untreated until sepsis set in. I left the meeting and drove to Meadowbrook. My father's room was empty. His things were packed in boxes stacked by the door. The camera was still mounted on the closet, still recording. I took it down and erased the footage from the cloud. I didn't need it anymore. The new facility was called Harmony Gardens. It was smaller, older, with scuffed floors and mismatched rearranged furniture in the common areas. The administrator gave me a tour and showed me my father's new room. It had a window facing a garden, a bed with clean sheets, and a recliner that looked like it had been reupholstered recently. We have 2 aides per hall during day shift, she said. 1 nurse on nights. Your father will be checked every 2 hours. Can I see the staffing schedule? She handed me a printed sheet without hesitation. Names, shifts, coverage gaps clearly marked. We're not fancy, she said, but we're honest. I moved my father that afternoon. He didn't understand what was happening. He kept asking where we were going. I told him we were going somewhere safer, and he nodded like that made sense. The first night at Harmony Gardens, I watched the monitor I'd set up on my phone. An aide came in at 9, helped my father into bed, adjusted his blankets, and asked if he needed anything. He shook his head. She smiled and told him to call if he changed his mind. She came back at 11 to check on him. He was asleep. She didn't wake him. At 6 in the morning, someone brought him breakfast and helped him sit up. They talked while he ate. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw him smile. I deleted the monitoring app. Reyes called me 3 weeks later. We're bringing charges. I need you to come to the prosecutor's office tomorrow at 10. We're confronting both Pritchards with the evidence. I drove to the courthouse with Diane. Victor and Linda were already in the waiting area outside Reyes's office. We sat together, not talking, until Reyes opened the door. Come in. The conference room was large, windowless, with a long table and chairs lining both sides. Patricia Pritchard sat on one side with her lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who looked annoyed to be there. Jennifer Pritchard sat beside her mother, younger, blonde, her face pale and tight. Reyes gestured for us to sit. He placed a laptop at the head of the table and opened a file. We're here to review evidence in a criminal investigation into elder abuse, fraud, and financial exploitation. Ms. Pritchard, you have the right to leave at any time, but I want you to see what we have before charges are formally filed. Patricia's lawyer leaned forward. My client denies all allegations. Then let's go through it. Reyes turned the laptop so they could see the screen. He played the footage from my father's room. The neglect, the rough handling, the falsified reports. He played footage from Victor's grandfather's room, then the daughter in 218, then 3 more patients. Patricia watched without expression. Jennifer stared at the table. Reyes opened a second file. Here are the financial records. 42 patients transferred from facilities managed by Patricia Pritchard to memory care facilities owned by Jennifer Pritchard over 6 years. The transfers generated approximately $2.3 million in additional revenue, split between Meadowbrook's operating budget and Greenhill Manor's accounts. We have bank records showing monthly payments from Greenhill Manor to an LLC owned by Patricia Pritchard. Patricia's lawyer started to speak. Reyes held up a hand. I'm not done. We also have testimony from 12 staff members who were instructed to understaff specific patient rooms, skip care rounds, and falsify incident reports. 3 of them recorded conversations with Patricia Pritchard, where she explicitly told them to document behavioral issues that didn't occur. He slid a stack of printed transcripts across the table. Patricia's lawyer skimmed the first page. His face went tight. These patients were neglected, abused, and exploited for profit, Reyes said. 5 of them died within months of being transferred. We're reviewing those deaths now. Patricia's voice was cold, controlled. Those patients needed higher level care. I made medical recommendations based on their behavior. If families refuse to follow those recommendations, that's not my fault. You fabricated the behavior? Staff documented what they observed. Staff documented what you told them to document. She didn't answer. Jennifer's hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the table and stared at her mother. We couldn't keep the facility open, she said quietly. Patricia turned. Don't. Greenhill was losing money. We were going to shut down. She said she could help. Jennifer stopped talking. She said dementia patients with behavioral issues generated higher reimbursement rates. All we had to do was create the documentation. Her voice broke. I didn't know they were lying. I thought the patients really needed the care. Patricia stood up. We're done here. Sit down, Reyes said. Her lawyer touched her arm. She sat. Reyes closed the laptop. Patricia Pritchard, Jennifer Pritchard, you're both under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. Additional charges may be filed pending the outcome of the death investigations. 2 officers came in from the hallway. They read the Pritchards their rights and cuffed them. Patricia stared straight ahead, her face blank. Jennifer cried. They walked them out. The room was silent. Diane touched my shoulder. It's over. The state shut down Meadowbrook 2 days later. All 63 residents were evaluated and transferred to other facilities. 15 of them had been subjected to the same scheme. The rest were moved because the facility couldn't operate under emergency state management. Victor and I met with the other families once a week for the next 2 months. We compiled evidence for the civil suits, tracked the criminal case, and made sure everyone's family member was safe in their new placement. The trial took 8 months. Both Pritchards were convicted on all counts. Patricia got 6 years. Jennifer got 4. The settlement from the lawsuit came a year later. I used my portion to start a nonprofit that teaches families how to recognize signs of neglect and financial exploitation. We train people to document care, request records, and install monitoring equipment. We've helped 32 families so far. My father lived another 11 months after I moved him to Harmony Gardens. He forgot my name most days, but he smiled when I walked in. The staff called him Mr. Ray and treated him gently. He died in his sleep on a Tuesday morning with clean sheets and no bruises. I was there when it happened. I'd been sitting with him since dawn, holding his hand. He opened his eyes once, looked at me, and squeezed my fingers. You're here, he said. I'm always here. He closed his eyes and stopped breathing a few minutes later. The nurse came in and checked his pulse, then nodded at me. I sat with him for another hour before I called anyone. They didn't steal that from us.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop your favorite part in the comments. See you in the next one.